Hello, lovely friends, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm sharing a very personal story about my journey with art, from failing my O-level as a teenager to retaking it in secret, to discovering years later how creativity and faith could come together in the most powerful way. If you've ever felt like you're not creative, or you've been told art isn't valid or isn't important, I want this episode to encourage you, because the truth is God has made us all creative, and when we allow Him into our art, He uses us. He uses art to heal us, to shape us, and to draw us closer to Him. So let's get to the episode. Okay, so today I'm talking about my art background, I suppose. When I was a child, art wasn't seen as a valid subject in my culture, because as an Indian with Indian heritage, both my parents were of Indian heritage and from Goa. And we came into the UK as refugees from Uganda, actually. But the background is Indian. And in that culture, the expectation is to do a proper job, get a proper degree. Doctor, lawyer, engineer would be the first sort of things. Then maybe accountancy, or then going into business, and just those sort of subjects would be seen as valid subjects, but art wasn't. And it did kind of shape my younger self, because it made me think that it wasn't important, that your creativity wasn't important. And that was for me, it was a big part of me, but I had to kind of bury it, really, and to please others. But that was, to one extent, I would do that, but to another, I didn't. So when it came to making my choices of O-levels, I did choose art alongside with the maths. I was very good at maths and the sciences, but it wasn't encouraged to do art, but I did do art. And I remember doing my art O-level in the June of 1985. 1985, May, June, and I got a D in it, and it was an abstract piece of art, which I thought was quite good, but obviously wasn't good enough. And so anyway, I wasn't deterred, because I just felt I want to be able to do that again, to prove to myself and to prove to the world, if need be, that I can do art. So I did it again under a different board, and I did it in the November, and this time I did a pastel of my best friend. So it was a portrait at the time, and I ended up getting a B. So from a D to a B in a matter of months, that was it. But you see, my parents didn't know that I was doing that, and I had to ask my older brother to pay for the exam, which he did kindly. I don't think I've paid him back since, but probably in kind I have. But yeah, so that you can see that I felt like I was rebelling. I felt like I was going against the expectations by choosing art, and it was more than just kind of like a private passion. I wanted to share that it was important to me, and my mum never sort of really acknowledged it. My dad acknowledged my art quite a lot. He was the one who would buy me colouring books when I was younger, and he was the one who would compliment me when I did a portrait of his mum, of my nana. so much so that he framed it and hung it up. So he obviously did have an artistic kind of tendency, and respected it and admired good art. But my mum didn't. So, but doing that portrait made me think, what do you like doing? I do like doing people's faces, and I do like doing flowers. I think I had to do irises as well as part of the composition, a separate piece, and I enjoyed doing those irises. And I think why I was determined to retake that exam was really to prove to myself that I can be artistic. But isn't it funny how you think that you have to prove yourself to the world, or to yourself even? Because really, I do sincerely believe that we are all creative. And hey lovely, I wanted to pop in quickly and tell you about something I think could be a real game changer for your creative and faith journey. If you've been listening to this podcast and thinking, I love these ideas, but how do I actually put them into practice in my own life? Don't worry, I've got you covered. I've created a free creative workshop that will guide you step by step into using art and journaling as a way to connect more deeply with God. Inside the workshop, I'll walk you through a simple but powerful process you can use right away to reduce stress, unlock your creativity, and hear God's voice in a fresh way. And here's the best part of it. You won't just be learning, you'll actually be doing. You'll create alongside me during the workshop and get a real taste of what it's like to be inside the Creative Sanctuary, my membership community for women who want to grow in faith and creativity together. So if you've ever felt stuck, overwhelmed, or like your creativity doesn't really count, I promise this free workshop is a wonderful next step for you. You can sign up today at christianartjournaling.com/free workshop. And I'd love for you to join me there and take your next step on this creative journey with God. All right, let's get back to today's episode. And even if I did a scribble on a page and I coloured in the gaps in between and I turned it into something else, like even with flowers, that is still artistic. So what was different about the second attempt was probably the subject matter. It was flowers. It was a portrait of someone who had the same colour skin as me as well. My friend was Indian as well. So it was probably my mindset as well was like the determination that I will pass this. And for me, it is important. So when I saw the B grade, I was happy, and it meant a lot to me at that age, at 15, 14, 16, whatever the age was. So I don't believe, what I think is that I've said that anyone can be creative, and I often get people at church, particularly, if I say, I'm doing an art retreat, or I'm doing this art workshop, and the immediate response is like, I'm not creative. And I just say back to them, I said, were you not made by the greatest creator? God is your creator. And then he made you in his image. So if you're made in his image, therefore you are creative. And they just kind of like do an awkward laugh, and they can see that in theory but not in practice. And that's what it's about though, isn't it? It's about trying. It's not about kind of like saying I can't do it. One of the things, my catchphrases is whenever someone says I can't, I just say to them, well, I don't know that word. And I think that's determination, because I just feel that just try and you never know what could happen. I mean, I didn't know how to do portraits. No one had taught me. And that's a funny thing about going to school, isn't it? You know, no one really teaches you. You aren't teach. Oh, maybe I just went to rubbish school, but they didn't teach me how to do portraits. You know, I had to work it out myself. And you can work things out yourself if you are determined to do it, and if you have the interest. So I do feel that creativity goes beyond grades and approval, because you could be creative in all sorts of things. You could be looking at the design of your kitchen, for instance, you know, or your bathroom. People have to do that, don't they, in everyday life? That is creative. You might be choosing different tiles and thinking, well, how can I put these together? You know, which colour goes with which tile or whatever. And that is creative. When you put your clothes on in the morning, you know, you can think, well, does that colour go with that colour, you know? And as I'm saying this, you know, I'm wearing a purple top and red trousers, and I'm thinking they don't really go together, you know, but maybe I just want to make a statement and clash. So that is creative. So art kept me sane, you know. That is what I want to say, is that the reason why I go on about art is because sometimes when I've gone through a dark period, things have been hard, and I want to just connect with God. It's that art that's kept me close to Him. And you can describe a moment, you know, I can describe a moment in my adulthood when, you know, I was going through a hard season. I was looking after a loved one who had severe mental health issues, constantly in and out of A&E after having attempted suicide. And, you know, my husband was not well at the time. He'd collapsed at work. We thought he'd had a heart attack. Thankfully, he's retiring very soon, taking early retirement. And, you know, obviously I had a teenage son at home. And, you know, if you had children or have children, you know what that's like with all the hormones and the tantrums. And, you know, I was running my private practice as a speech therapist, and, you know, having to see all these clients, and I was getting really stressed, and I just had to just give it to God. You know, my dad was dying as well in all this, and then my cat died in the end. And it was a really horrible season. And I just had to go to God, and with a paintbrush in my hand, I painted a bruise. And I just felt God say to me, I'm going to turn your mess into my message. And that's when, you know, I wouldn't say that's when I first discovered art journaling, because art journaling was when I was 43, when I went on a kind of like a spring harvest Christian conference, and someone was talking about art journaling, faith journaling, and drawing and writing Bible verses and all this sort of thing out. And I thought, wow, this is a new way of connecting with God. And so I was a bit slow to the game, if you like. But combining that faith, the Bible, what God is saying, with creativity has really deepened my spiritual life. It's made me want to open up the Bible and want to discover what God is saying. Because instead of knowing about someone, you get to know him more intimately as you draw things out. You know, God says things to you that, you know, you don't even think it's possible. So if you are a person who thinks faith is only about serious study, Bible study, and not about painting or colour and expression, I want you to think again, because, God has given us all this beauty around us. He created all those things. And this is how he showed his love and his care, by providing the apples and the pears on the trees, and the flowers, all different colours, all the creatures, all different shapes and sizes and patterns on them. He created all this to express his love for us and his provision for us. And so anyway, I'm going to just finish off now. If anyone's listening and feels like they've failed at art, or they believe they aren't creative, I want to encourage you that you are, and God loves you, and he's a creative God, and as you are being made in his image, he wants to be able to meet you at that place where you get to discover what he's saying through colour, through shapes, through doodling, and to incorporate the Bible verses in that as well. And I want you to see God as the ultimate creator, reflected in the way we create as well. So anyway, if you haven't signed up for the workshop that I'm doing on the 28th of August, which is actually tomorrow, and it's a Zentangle workshop with watercolour, then please do. I'll leave the link in the show notes. And if you are following on YouTube, please subscribe and leave a comment down below as to what you think about how you can be creative, or whether you think you are creative, and whether God can use that creativity for his purpose. So until next episode, thank you very much for tuning in.